time, your gateway to the world. A-F-R! American Freedom Radio. Give it to them.
Get real and heal. Listen to Christie on Soul Journeys Radio.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and happy Wednesday. It is June 5th, 2013. Hope you had a beautiful day. We are sure excited to have you joining us here at Soul Journeys Radio on AmericanFreedomRadio.com. And if you would like to join us for the text chat, that's over at SoulJourneysRadio.com. Just click on Listen and Chat up in the top about middle. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to give us a call tonight at 218-339-8525. That's 218-339-8525. And I would also, I know some of our listeners call in to hear us in the caller line, but we actually have a designated line where you can call in to listen to us, and we won't be picking up the phone saying, hey, talk now, and embarrassing you or whatever. So if you are calling in just to listen, that phone number is 704-772-7627. That's 704-772-7627. And then when it asks you to enter our station ID code, that is 10080. That's 10080. Okay, again, that number is to call in just to listen, but the caller line is open. We will be taking your calls at 218-339-8525. Woohoo! Tonight we are joined by the most beautiful Canadian goddess ever, kind of a holistic, healthy mama with a husband and a son, and really did, I think, contributed so much to the, I guess we can call it the truther movement, and kind of bringing it mainstream with her amazing videos that you can find on her YouTube site. That is youtube.com/TheTrutherGirls. Videos about things going on in the mainstream, some conspiracy stuff, lots of health information, and just definitely something there you are sure to find to help you out, make life a little bit easier and a little bit more clear. Her website is TrutherGirls.com, or you can find her on Facebook at Facebook.com/TheTrutherGirls. But tonight we're going to talk about mental illness and some often overlooked environmental factors, such as viruses and such, which are coming out in the media here recently. So, without further ado, it is so good to have you here tonight, Sonia. Thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
Hi, Christy. Thank you so much for such a sweet introduction. I'm doing good. How are you?
Yay, wonderful. You are one busy mama, that's for sure. I have no idea how you keep up with your videos and your show and everything you do. And I'm like, God, I haven't been able to do a video for a couple months now. So how do you juggle all of this stuff?
Oh, you know what? Usually, I like doing the videos, so usually it's not a big problem. I mean, I just try to be efficient, and I'm the kind of person who doesn't like to sit around doing nothing. Like, I almost never watch TV or hardly even watch videos. I'm either reading, or I'm creating something, or I'm trying to get something done. So usually it's like that. Although sometimes things will come up in my life and I won't be able to do as much of one thing or another as usual, but yeah, I really love making videos. I love, the way that we're exchanging information. I mean, I put up a video with some information, but I get so many great comments and tips from people in the comments field and the messages, and it really expands on my understanding of the topic that I brought up. So it's not a one-way thing. With YouTube, it's very interactive, and with the radio, too, that I do, it's like an ongoing education. I probably learned more in the last 4 years than I did in all those years at university.
Tell me about it.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, man, yeah. And who knew it would all happen from YouTube, huh?
Radio and Facebook and, yeah. No,
I know
it's good.
people want to knock it, YouTube or Facebook or things like that, but I don't know. I like to look at the positive aspect, which for me, it's just brought so much into my life as well. Wonderful people, learning new things, different ways to deal with things, and it's, damn, seriously, I mean, without the listeners or, video watchers or whatever, I certainly wouldn't be here, know what I know now. So I just want to thank you all for your part, especially our, text chatters and, regular listeners. You guys freaking rock.
Yeah, I feel the same. It's the internet, like the internet. I saw recently there was a study that showed that people who use Facebook are happy than people who don't. And I can understand that because it is kind of overload. Because with Facebook, it's like all this random stuff coming up at you in your home feed and so many people like messaging you about this or that or posting things. And it'll make you less focused. So in the end, if you're just like getting all these random bits of information from one direction and the other all the time, I think it will boggle your mind and your senses, and you get so many funny pictures. Like in the old days, you might hear a few funny things in real life. You might see the humor in a situation or have a joke with your friend. And it's good. Of course, it's really enjoyable. But when you keep getting like bombarded by humorous bits, after a while, I feel like so desensitized that now people want to show me things on Facebook like, look how funny this is. I'm like, yeah. Because at a certain point, you do kind of just have to say, okay, it's enough. Too much of a good thing. But on the other hand, with the internet, if you use it the right way and use it in a way for focused research and connecting with people in a more focused way, that's when you can really expand your understanding on anything. And like in my own experience, I've gotten so much from other people, not just reading scientific articles or articles on websites, but because I've met people through groups and then they have knowledge that they've shared with me. And like when I posted stuff about my son having problems, I got a ton of recommendations. I mean, everything from MMS to colloidal silver to diet to take him fishing and all kinds of things. And you get so much. And they were like, okay, now I got to sift through this. And I got to narrow it down and see what's useful and what isn't. Otherwise, you might just be like, oh, I can't hack it anymore. It's too much. And that's where other people will come in who've actually been in the same situation as you. That's why there are all these great groups of moms who are recovering their kids now.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about mental illness. But, what kind of got me on this topic was autism and recovering from autism and ADHD and things like that. Uh-oh, is that my Facebook? Oh, sorry.
It must be. It's all good. See, there you go. You're getting messages right now. Do this, do that. This worked for me.
We had my friend. But, it started out with, first I woke up about vaccines, and then I only started research, autism and recovery later. I mean, I'd heard some things about HBOT and chelation, and I knew that some very basic immune system and biological process had been interfered with. And I got that from books. I mean, I wasn't just like looking in chat rooms. I read books about biomedical treatment. But it was when I started, I guess my son started to have problems, and then I started going back to those books. And, I had interviewed people about these things before, but it was more about warning people about what could happen. But when I started to have problems with my own son, I started really researching these things a lot more, and I found out a lot. And then some of the people that I had met, they started talking to me about other conditions, not just autism, but things like PANDAS, which I'm going to tell you about. And then as a result of this process, I started looking at mental illness in general. Not that autism is a mental illness, but it's a medical illness with some neuropsychiatric symptoms, but so is PANDAS, so is ADHD. A lot of these things, they're physical problems, they're biological problems. And when the kids with autism, when their underlying medical problems are treated, such as detoxification, elimination of foods they're sensitive to, getting rid of yeast overgrowth, parasites, restoring the gut, all these things. Then they often enough lose their autism diagnosis.
Yeah.
And the same can happen for ADHD. So I started thinking, well, could it be that the same could be true for various other mental illnesses? And this could be, I don't really like to use the word mental illness because it makes it sound like Looney Tunes, put them in the psych ward. But there's so much there. I mean, it could be anything from depression to childhood neuropsychiatric problems to schizophrenia. And as I'm researching this, I'm finding that actually there are a lot of environmental causes. It's not like you're just born that way and boom, you had this gene and now you're going to be this way. There's a lot more to it. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of factors, and a lot of it is treatable and reversible.
Definitely. If not all of it. It's just the trick is, you mentioned the dietary issues. We're not all the same. And I know a lot of approaches, it's like, oh, well, this is the way, this is the only way. But we don't really know that unless we're living that. So you as a parent, of course, have to go through the trial and error. Oh, is it blueberries? Is it cream? Is it toast? Is it mac and cheese or whatever? So, the process of elimination before we can really, as parents, find out what that is that's triggering our children.
Yeah, and that's the dietary stuff is really important. And I had my son tested for food sensitivities. Turns out that something like 30 to 50% of white, I say white because I'm not really sure about the other races, but I know for sure with white North Americans and Western Europeans are sensitive to gluten in wheat.
Yes. Yeah.
And it has to do with a few things. The lectins in the wheat, that they can be neurotoxic, and then also like a lot of people have a leaky gut or they have sensitivity. It's actually like a kind of celiac disease without the gut symptoms, in the sense that you don't get stomach cramps and that kind of thing. But the symptoms are psychiatric, and so that's why a lot of autistic kids or ADHD kids or kids in general, a lot of them do better when they're off gluten, and also this goes for casein, which is a protein in milk. So that can cause problems. I guess I'll talk about that more. But there are other ones. There's soy and there are eggs, and then you could have sensitivity to anything. And I know someone whose son was diagnosed with ADHD. And I know that some people think ADHD there's no such thing at all. I mean, it's just a question of the kids having to sit too long in class. And you know what? It's not. There are some kids that are just they're like, the teacher says, I want them on Ritalin because they won't sit still. But there really are kids that, in fact, some doctors who deal with autism consider severe ADHD to be just on the autism spectrum because there's so much overlap with the symptoms.
Yeah. In regards to the symptoms, like what you're mentioning, dairy and gluten and things like that, most of us have symptoms, whether it's celiac disease or ADHD or autism. They're just, we just call it something different. I mean, those products can hurt basically anyone. It just ends up maybe being heart disease 20 years later. As opposed to, because I think the reason children are coming up with more and more of these diagnoses today is that our diets are totally different than it was 50 years ago.
That has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Somebody again just said in the chat, ADHD is pure BS. Well, the label itself saying that this is a distinct disorder and that it requires treatment with Ritalin, or that it's this distinct disorder, that I think is BS. I don't think that they have found a disease when they call it ADHD.
Yes.
I don't think at all. I think that psychiatric labels, a lot of them are pretty arbitrary. And the proof in this is that you could take your kid to one doctor and they could say they're very mildly autistic. Another one might say it's ADHD. Another one might say it's a sensory thing. Or another one might just say it's a behavioral problem. Because, it's not exact science. Really, it isn't.
No.
And the labels, it's like there's so much overlap of the symptoms of autism with the symptoms of ADHD or other things. I mean, yeah, I know
so
that
that's just basically a label, but it's basically, I think that's why they overact the different names, or I'm sorry, why they, kind of the symptoms are similar in each of these labels, because that's what they are. They're just labels of a set of symptoms. That doesn't mean that the effect is not, I guess you could call it disease-like or ill-like. But, for example, we can experience those same symptoms just simply by being dehydrated or malnourished on some other level, if we're just eating fast food every day, or, other environmental causes, drugs, air pollution, viruses, etc., what we'll be talking about tonight.
Well, yes and no. I mean, some of it you can. Like, if you're not feeling well, you'll be kind of spaced out. But the symptoms, like a kid who really has what they would label them as ADHD, it's not just a kid who's very active. I mean, a kid like this is absolutely loopy. And the thing is that and I'm not saying that in a mean way. I'm really not. I know people who have kids that are like that, and it's not the parenting. And the thing is that the parenting techniques that normally would work, they won't work as well. It's like the kid is, how can I put it? There's some problem with how they process things in their brain that makes them really unable to fully control their impulses. So normally you might want to run straight down the street into some place you're not supposed to go, but you know that you shouldn't do that for various reasons, including the fact that your mother's going to pull you right out. Have such extremely poor impulse control, they'll repeatedly do things that are dangerous or will get them in trouble, and even knowing it, and they're unable to stop that impulse. Like, that's just part of it. But anyhow, I know you're going into a break.
Yeah, definitely. Good point, honey. It's that time. We will be right back. Stay tuned. TrutherGirl Sonia here on SoulJourneysRadio.com.
It's time to get real and heal. MyTrueEssence.net would like to tell you about Modifiland brown seaweed extract. It's composed of an elementally rich seaweed called laminaria. It takes 40 pounds of laminaria to make just 1 pound of Modifiland. There's nothing else like Modifiland. It is the richest in alginate, fucoidin, organic iodine, and lamarian. Alginates are the most effective organic element in nature that enable the body to rid itself of heavy metals, radioactive elements, and toxins. Fucoidin is an extremely effective anti-cancer substance found abundantly in brown seaweed. Organic iodine is the greatest protection for the thyroid offered by nature. Laminarin aids in the prevention and treatment of cardiovascular disease. Go to www.mytrueessence.net and click the Modifiland banner to get started on your path to rich health today. Also, check out the Healing Shop for proven essential oils, medicinal teas, and even health coaching. It's time to get real and heal. Go to www.mytrueessence.net.
Get real and heal. Listen to Christie on Soul Journeys Radio.
No rules. No rules. No taboo topics. No taboo topics. No fear of doom. No fear of doom. We are American Freedom Radio. American Freedom Radio.
All right, welcome back, and thanks for joining us here tonight, Soul Journeys Radio on AmericanFreedomRadio.com with our special guest tonight, TrutherGirl Sonia. By the way, she has a show here on AmericanFreedomRadio.com every Friday evening. That's 9 to 11 p.m. Central Time, and we're talking about environmental causes of mental illness and such, and we do both use that word loosely. So while, I'll speak for myself, I may not agree with the mainstream approach to it. There definitely are environmental, nutritional, biological, and emotional factors that are causing issues that, we get to deal with, unfortunately, in this world. However, I don't even know if it's really that unfortunate, because maybe it is our path. And Sonia, I wrote something in the chat. I just posed the question, and this is specifically related to autism. And I'm not saying it in all autism cases, because I do know many have healed and can heal and will heal. But what if, and maybe this is kind of more of a spiritual question, but what if there's nothing to be healed?
you know what?
To be exactly like us, and they're here to bring other, lessons to be learned, other, brilliance and genius, and yeah.
Okay, Christie, this is something that I've heard. Everyone's heard this. Oh, there's nothing wrong with the ADHD kid or the kid with autism. Let's say autism. They're crystal children and they have special gifts and all that. I think there are a lot of myths about autism. Like, first of all, there are some children who are autistic who are geniuses, but most of them are just not. They're just average. Some of them are lower than average. They have some areas that they're more gifted in than others, but it doesn't mean that they're going to have one thing that's really exceptional. Like they may be more inclined to one thing than the other. The thing is, and of course, they're people's children and they're wonderful in their own way, and that's all fine. And we don't want everybody to come out of a cookie cutter. And I could tell you a few things about myself that I am absolutely not neurotypical, and I was not as a baby. And it actually took me a while to realize that. I could maybe tell you more about that after. Everybody kind of agreed there was something wrong with me as a baby or as a child. They didn't really know what it was. I had a lot of sensory issues, a lot of things. I guess I'll tell you more about that after. And probably, if it was these days, I would have been diagnosed with some kind of sensory processing disorder at the very least, or some kind of Asperger's, or I don't know what. And, at the time, people didn't really know so much. And the end result was that I suffered a lot because of this, because I wasn't able to keep up with the world and what was expected of me. Because, like it or not, you do have to at some point learn to live on your own usually. That's the goal for people who have children with special needs. Yeah. They want their children to be self-sufficient, able to live on their own, take care of themselves, maybe even have a job, and basically be happy and able to function, right? So if you have a problem that's really severe, and for me it was pretty, mild. It wasn't like I wasn't talking and stuff like that, but there are other things. But for me, I ended up actually suffering a lot from it because of this and because not knowing what my problem was. And for kids who are autistic, well, they actually suffer a lot, and a lot of their problem is physical. So when people say, these are just crystal children, they're great. It's yeah, me too. I also have some special gifts, and I wouldn't really want to be someone else. But the issues that I had that maybe are a result of some kind of sensory processing problem or whatever, they did cause me a lot of trouble. And I did have to learn to kind of work around them, and I still work around them, But let's say for a kid who has autism, they're not well. This is what people don't understand. These kids are physically in pain a lot of the time. They don't respond to stimulus coming in the way most people do. It is totally overwhelming. It hurts them physically. They're not able to express themselves. A lot of them are nonverbal, and they can't even express themselves. Yeah. And a lot of them are not able to take care of themselves on a basic level for themselves. They need a caregiver all the time. Okay, that's kind of a problem.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm totally not denying that at all.
And there's more. Okay, a lot of them have chronic, serious gut issues, and they're in a lot of pain. And coupled with the fact that they're nonverbal, they're hitting themselves, banging their heads, they're having tantrums. And again, doing stuff like trying to anger manage or make them meditate, or it's not going to work. It's way beyond that. What was another thing? A lot of them have things like seizures as well.
Yeah.
And when somebody says, "Oh, your kid is," just let them be. They're just crystal children. And I heard a mom say recently, that's all fine and nice. So I'm just going to be happy with my kid, or it's a blessing that he has seizures every night. You know what I'm saying? They're dealing with some very serious medical problems. These kids have autoimmune conditions. They have gut problems. They have asthma. They have allergies. They have sensory issues that are debilitating. They have speech delays. Sometimes they can form words. A friend, her child is 11. He has a big vocabulary, but he cannot use it the way we use it. And when you hear him talk, it's clear he has trouble even getting the word out. I went to school with a couple autistic guys, and you know, they had some cool things about them. Like one of them, we really liked him a lot. He was pretty awesome. The other one was a little bit like Rain Man. Like he had the whole map of the U.S. memorized, but he couldn't take care of himself in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Like he was not able to live self-sufficiently and independently. So crystal children, well, okay, you take that crystal child and, you know, you want to have a child like that and just say, this is great, let's just leave it the way it is. But I know that Jeremy was not, oh, speaking of adorable children, my little angel just walked over. Do you want to go lie down over there?
He wants to join us for the show. Woohoo!
Do you want to go get your blanket? My poor little guy. I thought he was going to fall asleep, but he's not used to doing that. Anyway, the point is that
Mama's busy. He wants to see what he's missing.
and here's the thing: like when they look at what their problems are, there's genetic problems like mitochondrial dysfunction. There's MTHFR mutation that cause an inability to detoxify. There's parasites. There's gut dysbiosis where the flora in the gut is so off. And when your flora is off, then you'll be, you know, if you have a leaky gut, you'll be allowing large molecules from foods to get into your brain. This can actually cause brain damage down the road, like with lectins. They prevent neurogenesis. So some of these autistic children, their brains are literally not myelinated properly. The myelin is like this fatty coating on the brain that makes the nervous system nice and slick. You know, so like you don't have enough myelin, your nervous system is like raw. You'll have jerky movements. You can't function properly. So in regards
to nutrition, I mean that happens when we're deficient on omegas 3s, 6s, 9s, etc. So
yeah, and they give that. That's one of the basic things that people give, like doctors will give autistic kids would be, and ADHD as well, and for like attention and for really anybody, but especially kids with these problems. Zinc also is an important one. They say no zinc, no think, you know. But it has to do with the way that their body like processes minerals, so they'll have a zinc deficiency sometimes even if they're eating a normal diet. But then there are other things like MTHFR, and then they require B12 shots to help them detoxify. Mm-hmm. And you know, there could be there are a lot of things, and for people who have autistic children, like it's a long haul recovery process. And of course you love your child, but again, who doesn't want their child to be able to be, you know, able to take care of themselves in life? That's what we all want for our children. We want them to be able to live independently and, you know, do something that they love in life. You don't want your child to end up in an institution just because, you know, you're not going to be around forever.
Yeah, of course.
You know, 'cause that's the reality of it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying that there's nothing that needs to be healed. I mean, there certainly is, and I've definitely seen success in, you know, natural healing ventures. I have never once seen success healing it with vaccines or drugs. No. And, you know, but I'm just suggesting, you know, what if they're not supposed to be exactly just like us? And I'm saying provided that they can care for themselves as adults. But I don't know. I'm telling you, the autistic children and people I know are like the most brightest, brilliant people ever. And they're just, I think they teach us a lot. New ways to communicate, such as through our heart, our intuition, teaching us empathy, and, you know, all of those types of things. So, yeah, I was just questioning.
Are you talking about adults?
I do know people that are autistic, and when I grew up, I was blessed to go to the one school in the county that had I don't even know what they called it. It was a separate school. It was for autistic children, people with cerebral palsy, and other, they called them learning disabilities at the time. So I volunteered there for many years up until my children actually ended up going there their first year of school before I started homeschooling. So, yeah, in fact, I'm still friends with them. And in fact, one of them's a teacher. today, Carmen, which is just like so beautiful. I mean, yeah, she has what most people would call a disability, but she's living a perfectly wonderful, functional life and now teaching other children. So
well, that's really great. No,
yeah.
For sure. You know, I mean, they do have their own unique gifts, like everyone does. They have unique gifts that they bring to the world. But, you know, let's just not make no mistake, though. Most children with autism, they do have a lot of physical, medical, and et cetera problems, and they do suffer from it. You know, like when you go into these groups with people trying to heal their autistic children, they're talking about these kids, you know, having seizures at night and, you know, not being able to keep food down or what was the other thing, like having a lot of stomach pains and not being able to say what it is and et cetera. So let's just make it clear that there is a medical problem and you don't want to just leave them alone and not try to heal them.
Exactly.
But at the same time, there's no need to try to make everyone fit a cookie cutter mold, but I don't think anybody's talking about, you know, that. And so let's say like, well, with my son, he's behind me now on the couch, but I mean, he knows what happened to him.
We can talk about him later.
Yeah. Well, you know, but this, yeah, he's here now, so I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about. But like, okay, let's say, in children, there's one thing that I came to look. Sorry, now my cell phone is going. Came to research more because of what happened with my son. He had an illness in March, and he had a fever for a couple of days. I called the helpline. I took him to the doctor at the very beginning, before the fever even started. His feet were peeling, and the doctor just said, put some lotion on it. And I thought, you must be kidding me. Is that all you can come up with? And then after that, he came down with a fever. And then the fever went down, but I didn't send him to school right away. And after 2 days, that night, it came back, and they always say, you know, if the fever comes back, you should take him in. But that's because you could get a virus like a flu and then get a bacterial infection like pneumonia. And he didn't have pneumonia. The fever was very low. So I called the helpline, and she said, well, you know, just keep an eye on him, see if it gets worse. But the fever was very low, and it was only in the evening. So I did take him in. And he had some other symptoms. And, you know, I asked her about strep, the second doctor, and she just brushed it off. She hardly even examined him, and she sent us away. But the biggest thing I was concerned about was his mental state seemed to be altered, and his behavior had changed a lot. Yeah. And my kid had always been a very happy kid, and suddenly he was having these tantrums that I had never seen him do anything like this, you know, repeating the same word over and over and over and banging his head and totally like you couldn't reason with him and aggressive, you know, these kind of things. And she brushed it off. Well, it got to the point where his piano teacher couldn't teach him anymore. His language teacher couldn't have him in class. I tried to bring him, and she called me and said, you have to pick him up. I mean, it was like he was like unreachable. Then his language started to deteriorate, and some of the words he used to use, he wasn't using anymore. He was like using circumlocution, like talking around things because he couldn't express himself. And his speech had deteriorated. Mm-hmm. His handwriting deteriorated. He stopped coloring. He stopped drawing. He never really was dressing himself that much, but whatever he was doing, he also stopped that. He couldn't seem to remember steps for things like washing his hands. And when you looked at the big picture, there was a really big change. So I brought him to a third doctor, and that one said he thought he might be on. But we're going into a break again. Well, anyway, I ended up having to bring up the strep with the third doctor, and then it turned out he did have strep in the throat and in his blood, and what he had is probably what's known as Candace, and he's being treated now, and he's improved so much.
Awesome, honey. Hold that right there. Yeah, we have to take a short break, but we will pick up right where we left off after these few short minutes. Stay tuned. Soul Journeys Radio.
It's time to get real and heal. MyTrueEssence.net would like to tell you about Modifiland brown seaweed extract. It's composed of an elementally rich seaweed called laminaria. It takes 40 pounds of laminaria to make just 1 pound of Modifiland. There's nothing else like Modifiland. It is the richest in alginate, fucoidin, organic iodine, and lamarian. Alginates are the most effective organic element in nature that enable the body to rid itself of heavy metals, radioactive elements, and toxins. Fucoidin is an extremely effective anti-cancer substance found abundantly in brown seaweed. Organic iodine is the greatest protection for the thyroid offered by nature. Laminarin aids in the prevention and treatment of cardiovascular disease. Go to www.mytrueessence.net and click the Modifiland banner to get started on your path to rich health today. Also check out the Healing Shop for proven essential oils, medicinal teas, and even health coaching. It's time to get real and heal. Go to www.mytrueessence.net.
Get real and heal. Listen to Christie on Soul Journeys Radio.
Yo, what's up? Check this out.
The voice of the revolution. American Freedom Radio. American Freedom Radio.
All right, welcome back, and thanks for joining us here tonight with TrutherGirl Sonia on SoulJourneysRadio.com. Again, her website is TrutherGirls.com, or you can go to her Facebook page, which is Facebook.com/TheTrutherGirls, or YouTube.com/TheTrutherGirls. Hundreds of videos about all sorts of things going on in the world, like what we're talking about here tonight, and much more. Natural health information, personal experiences, and some fine comedy routines there. So my favorite, Anita Hitt. I hear that I was blessed to be the first person to interview her live, so woo-hoo, that's my claim to fame. But I see we have a caller on the line, Sonia, but I know you left off talking about the strep infection, so we'll get to the caller after you finish that up, if that's okay.
Okay, so he had these very drastic behavioral changes. Now, the doctor who met him, the first two, they only spent about 10 minutes with them, so they don't know him, they don't know what he was like, and they don't really know that much about what's going on. So, in a sense, the mother is in a way better position to tell the doctor like how severe the changes or what the symptoms are or whatever. With the third one, he's an integrative medicine doctor, so he prescribes a lot of natural things as well as pharmaceuticals if needed, but it's more on the natural end. And I brought up strep the second visit, because I went to see him 3 times, and the second one I said, could it be pandas? Because my son was having absolute rages, and he was displaying like OCD symptoms. I mean, he was doing things like stacking pennies for 2 hours, and I don't mean stacking them like making cities and playing. I mean like stacking a stack, and it fall down, stacking it, fall down, stacking it, fall down for 2 hours. Mm-hmm. Rearranging everything, lining everything up, cleaning, but in a strange way, and like having to clean every single car, and if I try to pull him off, that he'd go absolutely ballistic. But there was also the language and all these other skills that had deteriorated. It was like a bit of a behavioral regression, an obsession with very strange things that, like talking about death a lot and stuff, which is not normal for a 5-year-old, not in the way that he was doing it especially, and these very aggressive tantrums which he hadn't had. And it was like you were dealing with someone who was it was like he was rabid or something, like an absolute blind rage. Like he clawed me, and my kid loves me, and he was always a happy little angel. And he had certain things that were different about him or whatever before, but he was never like that. Okay, we always had a very good relationship, and it was about nothing. I mean, it was just about some little thing that normally a kid would deal with, like I said, okay, it's time to turn off the computer, or, he's playing with somebody and like the toy fell over, or I don't know what. It's just like little things. Mm-hmm. Or I made him I don't know. Sometimes he tried to run into traffic, and I had to stop him, and he would like throw himself down the sidewalk, and I mean, absolutely freaking out in public, and there was no way you could talk to him and say take a breath, or no like anger management, behavior management you could not implement it. He was so far gone, he was so loopy that we started to understand why people give their kids psych meds, because I thought, thank God he's only 5, because he was 15, I'd be afraid he would kill me. me, you know, like I don't want to say, you know, anything like bad about my kid, but it's not his fault. So anyway, with the third visit with the third doctor, I finally got him to really consider strep. I said, look, these are signs of pandas. He even had tics. He was doing like vocal tics like all day, going like and the snorting sound and like all day long. And his body would just suddenly jerk. And he'd say, I said, what are you doing? He goes, sometimes my body does that. So I started thinking, you know, I've been kind of overlooking this, but I think these are tics. So, and he would have cycles. That was the other thing that told me it was pandas. Like he'd start out sort of okay for a couple hours in the morning, and then he'd get loopier and loopier. And it was like almost like autistic kind of symptoms. And then it would progress into a rage. And then he would go back to a kind of baseline where he'd be kind of normal for like maybe half an hour or so, and then he'd get loopier and loopier again, and then another rage. So I noticed that there were cycles, and this is something that happens with pandas. It goes in cycles. There's really nothing you can do to stop the rage. I'd have to basically put him down on the floor and keep him from hurting himself or me. And it was really horrible, and I couldn't do anything. I mean, it was like you couldn't even go down the street. I mean, literally one block was just hell. To the corner, I put him in the corner. I have to go to the corner. I did try all the stuff that I usually learn, you know, I learn from Super Nanny. I gave him timeouts. It really didn't make a difference. It was like he really did not have the ability to intercept his impulses. Walking down the street, he would run into every entrance, every store. He would run into the street. It was like dealing with like a kid who just learned to walk and who also doesn't listen and is also like wired up on coffee. It was really, really hard to deal with. And talking to him, like there was no back and forth conversation anymore. It was like he was acting like Rain Man. He was repeating things over and over again. Like you'd be trying to have a conversation and he'd keep repeating lines from TV shows and trying to get us to do it as well. He just kept repeating them, and it was really disturbing. I mean, he really looked like he was losing his mind, and we were totally like freaking out. And I got to a point where I said, you know, I understand why people put their kids on Risperdal, because what if it's a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old and they might, you know, stab you or something because they're out of their mind. Yeah. And I understand why people bring their kid to the hospital. Yet I was not going to do that because I said, no, I think I know what this is. I think this is pandas. And this was the 5th doctor appointment. I finally got him to give him a throat and blood test for strep. I said, I know he didn't have throat symptoms in March, but I want you to test for strep. Sure enough, the throat came back positive, and then the blood came positive, but weekly, showing that the infection was some time ago, which would make sense because it was 2 months ago. And he said, yes, he did have strep, even though he didn't have the strep throat. He never complained of a cough. And the doctor who examined him took one look in his throat and said, nope, not strep. And yet he had strep, and he may even have had rheumatic fever, although mildly. I mean, it may have just been part of the strep. He had sore joints, and he like at one point he couldn't stand on his feet, and the doctor said, oh, that's from hand, foot, and mouth disease because the blisters hurt. But it weren't blisters. It was just peeling right off. His skin was peeling off his feet. So anyhow, I figured it was strep, and I figured it was panda. So they finally gave us antibiotics, and sure enough, his behavior started to improve right away. And now it's been, 8 days? And no more tantrums, no more attacking. He's still a little loopy, but I mean, he was a little loopy before that. But you know, he's pretty good. He's pretty normal. I mean, he's just a tripped out kid, you know. But I wouldn't say that it's anything that I would not. I mean, it's hard to go anywhere with him because he doesn't like. It's like he doesn't hear you a lot. You know, you talk to him, and it's like you have to like really get in front of him and be like, do you hear me?
Well, children are really, really good at selective hearing. I think it's like a mom thing. They learn how to tune our voices out, and like when they're with other people, oh, everything's perfect. Oh,
no, he's not.
So lovely, and listen, and you know, when they come home with me, it's like, were you talking about these children?
Yeah, that's common, but that's something different. I mean, I know that kids do that, but no, he's like that with everyone. He's like that all the time. He's very much like kind of in his own world. He's like he doesn't really. This was why the doctor said, oh, you should still get him tested, because he doesn't really look at you and you talk. He just doesn't have the, like, when I spend time with other kids, that's when I realized how different he was, that it's like he's not quite there with you, and there's not the same kind of back and forth. I mean, I can get it out of him depending on, I'll play with him and I'll be cuddling him and I mirror him and I make sounds with him and do stuff, and he'll, I'll engage him, but he's not naturally the most give and take and focused, and he doesn't respond well to like social cues. But I don't really care, if he's a little different, that's fine. I just don't want him to be suffering. And before, it was bad. It was really bad. And part of it is a lot of anxiety. That's what comes with pandas, anxiety and extreme separation anxiety. Like, I couldn't go anywhere because he would attack the babysitter, like really attack. So nobody want to watch him, and I couldn't go anywhere. And all this other stuff, And but I gave him the antibiotics, but also I've been looking into herbs. And I found that there are some herbs, because a virus can also trigger it. So if you've had this, then another viral illness can trigger it. So I endeavored to like get his viral load and bacterial load really down. And I've been using olive leaf extract as well as oil of oregano.
Oh, good. Okay, I was wondering if you had tried any natural antibiotics.
For sure, yeah. And he's getting a lot out of it. And borage oil also. If the kid has a problem with inflammation, anything that brings down the inflammation will improve the behavior, and that's what I'm seeing with him. So I'll leave it at that. I know you're going into a break.
Yeah, this is good news, but it is that time. We will be back at the top of the second hour here, and I see the caller's still on the line, so we will get to you in a few short minutes. Stay tuned, souljourneysradio.com.
It's time to get real and heal. MyTrueEssence.net would like to tell you about Modifiland brown seaweed extract. It's composed of an elementally rich seaweed called laminaria. It takes 40 pounds of laminaria to make just 1 pound of Modifiland. There's nothing else like Modifiland. It is the richest in alginate, fucoidin, organic iodine, and lamarian. Alginates are the most effective organic element in nature that enable the body to rid itself of heavy metals, radioactive elements, and toxins. Fucoidin is an extremely effective anti-cancer substance found abundantly in brown seaweed. Organic iodine is the greatest protection for the thyroid offered by nature. Laminarin aids in the prevention and treatment of cardiovascular disease. Go to www.mytrueessence.net and click the Modifiland banner to get started on your path to rich health today. Also, check out the Healing Shop for proven essential oils, medicinal teas, and even health coaching. It's time to get real and heal. Go to www.mytrueessence.net.
Get real and heal. Listen to Christie on Soul Journeys Radio.
No rules. No rules. No taboo topics. No taboo topics. No fear of doom. No fear of doom. We are American Freedom Radio. American Freedom Radio.
Right, welcome back. Top of the second hour here tonight. Soul Journeys Radio on AmericanFreedomRadio.com. And if you would like to join us for the text chat, that's over at SoulJourneysRadio.com. And any questions or comments, please feel free to give us a call at 218-339-8525. That's 218-339-8525. TrutherGirl Sonia is our special guest tonight. We're talking about quote unquote mental illness and environmental factors here. So lots to talk about, and that's really good news about your son. But Sonia, we have a caller on the line. Did you want to get in and see what they have to add?
Sure.
All right, here we go. Area code 319. Welcome to the show.
Well, hi. Thank you so much. I'm glad to call in. I want to say thank you to Sonia for bringing the pandas to our attention, because I did not know about that. I really thank you so much. I've shared that with many, many people, because everyone wonders what is OCD and what are these things going on with people, and no one is looking for strep. And I champion, I think we're all champions in a way of pursuing something with doctors saying, please check this, and then we keep going, and they turn you down and they don't want to check it, and you made your way through, Sonia, so that's awesome. I thank you for that.
Thanks.
Awesome. All right. Well, did you have anything else you want to share or talk about with us tonight?
Well, I've shared with the TrutherGirls YouTube. It was either on YouTube or on Facebook about the idea of low blood sugar where kids can have tantrums. And I guess my take in life has to do with this phrase: your biology creates your biography. And in our 21st century now, the end of the 20th century, there was so much emphasis on the mental or emotional illnesses where they weren't looking at biological factors, but it's the biology that's creating people's biography. And so if a person's ranting because they're using adrenaline for energy instead of eating protein, it's attributed to a mental thing. Oh, he has anxiety, or, oh, he's just upset because something bad happened, instead of going back and peeling back the layers and saying, wait a minute, is there something physical that we could fix here first? And I had an experience 2 days ago. I think that I'm supposed to share this, that I was at a hospital where somebody was near death, and the speech therapist came in, and I thought, why are they bringing speech in here? And she was checking to see why this dear friend of ours wasn't swallowing, and she had her doing speech therapy with her. She said, say the sounds p, 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 t, 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 k, k, k. And if she couldn't say those three sounds, that was the indicator for knowing that her tongue wasn't working right in her mouth, and she wasn't able to swallow. And then they said, well, she's reserving food in the, I can't remember the word they used, in the side of her mouth. Well, I was teaching in a preschool for handicapped kids this spring, and those exact things were behaviors they were blaming the kids for. Oh, this girl is just hoarding food in her mouth because she's poor or whatever. She just wants to save food for later. Well, no. She had something either neurologically wrong with her swallowing reflex or something. And why wasn't that speech therapist doing those tests on these kids? Yeah. And the one that was ranting, 5-year-old that was ranting and would I'm thinking now, thanks to Sonia, I'm thinking he has more OCD than autism, but he was on the quote-unquote spectrum. And they would call the office, and 3 great big, tall, 6-foot-tall guys would come in and take this little 5-year-old, put him in timeout. He'd be throwing things, then they'd bring him out, because when you're 5, you're only supposed to be in timeout for 5 minutes. And he didn't get it. He didn't get why he was in timeout. He didn't get why he's doing anything that he's doing, but also he wouldn't eat lunch. He degraded throughout the day. No energy. He was using adrenaline for energy because he had none. I said, why doesn't he take a nap? And you know what they said, the psychologist said? She said, well, when he came to school 3 years ago, they said he wasn't a napper at home. I thought, why isn't this kid getting a chance to rest his brain? He's learning something new. He doesn't have the energy for it. Why doesn't he sleep? These were biology creating your biography questions. And I love the conversation that you both are having because it's really in concert with this, but I thought I'd add that speech therapy part. Because schools, I don't know, even when they have these other staff people there, they're quote-unquote, dancing between the medical world and the educational world, I don't know if they're really dancing. I don't even know why they're not making these links when that's their training.
You know
but they're not making the link to biology.
And like the things that Sonia's talking about tonight and what you're bringing up has me remembering, my motherhood days where we went through that in the schools before we started homeschooling my daughter. She couldn't read, write, talk. She was minimum 2 years behind everyone, and they would do the tests. They would pull her out for the testing, but they have such regimented criteria that my daughter would miss it by a half a point each time. Like if she was 1/2 point worse, then she would have been able to qualify for special help, learning assistance, and perhaps even a diagnosis. So we knew where to look. And, every time we got the results, like the psychologist, the, learning specialist, the teachers, literally all of us would like be in tears thinking, how did she not qualify again? Clearly, she, something is going on, but we never knew what it was. We never heard of pandas. We never heard of any of this stuff. And, the things that they could test and give diagnoses for, like ADD, ADHD, things like that, that never came up.
It didn't fit her. Yeah, that's because she didn't fit ADHD and she didn't fit autism. Yeah. And by the way, to the caller, I saw your comments. It must have been you. I read all those comments, and I saw your comments on the video about protein and the blood sugar. And there is such a thing as some kids are prone to hypoglycemia, and you have to really be careful to keep their blood sugar stable. And I've been reading about that in this book I have by Dr. Kenneth Bach also, and I thought, maybe I should, consider that more because he does get more unraveled when he's hungry. But I did find, though, that even if I kept him very well fed, it really didn't solve the problem. But it didn't help. If he was hungry, for sure, it would make it worse. But keeping him very stable I started giving him more protein, but it didn't solve it. I mean, he still had those rages, but
that's because that wasn't his problem, but I'm glad you.
It's important, though. It's important. You're absolutely right. And the rest too. I knew he would get tired by the afternoon, but he wouldn't sleep. And when I tried to get him to sleep, I'd just end up falling asleep myself. But I did look at that, and I do feed him more meat and stuff like that now. But in the end,
they really push the cereals for breakfast, and the cereal doesn't last with a kid. I watch it every time.
No, I don't give him cereal. But the antibiotics and the herbs were what really made a difference. And I know that it was bacterial. It came back with strep.
Yeah,
so
I just wanted to point out
you
that
really
it
found
wasn't
out
the teacher's fault. It wasn't the learning specialist's fault. It wasn't the psychologist's fault. It was just that they're in this system that, you have to be in this box. Either you're all the way in or you're all the way out. And that kind of leaves people, no children left behind. My ass, I'm telling you, they were behind the whole way, which is why, I just finally got frustrated and said, okay, well, let's homeschool. What else can we do? Because trying to keep up with the other children in their programs and trying to be, learn or feel like she has to learn the way they do was actually only causing more harm because, Mom, what's wrong with me? And, oh, honey, nothing. We had nowhere to look. We had no idea. So it's not the schools or their fault, unfortunately. It's the system.
It is.
It is a system.
But if you
they don't want anyone questioning it.
Yeah.
If you taken her to
bless your heart.
If you'd taken her to a doctor that would really look at the individual signs, like as in symptoms, and look at the underlying causes, then they might have found that maybe she's intolerant to a certain food, maybe she doesn't well, maybe she had a toxicity, and you don't need a label like ADHD. Even kids who have autism, that label will get them therapies and things, but in the end, the label doesn't solve anything. You need to figure out what's under, and once you do that, then they lose their labels anyway.
Yeah, I mean, this is my point was we just had nowhere to look. We didn't know. We weren't told anything. And as you mentioned earlier, in the first hour, Sonia, is that the label is what it is. It's a list of a set of symptoms, but that name or that diagnosis would have at least given us somewhere to look rather than just deal with getting punched in the face and, being looked at like you're a bad mom because your daughter is so far behind.
Yeah, that is a pressure on moms. It definitely is. And it's unfair.
I feel like that, too. Like, I got a lot of comments on the Internet, well, you guys must be abusing him or you're not disciplining him enough. Or one even said you need to take him fishing. It's because you live in the city. And you know what? I actually did take him fishing, and he still had the same problem because, that wasn't the cause of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. It's so tough. There's a lot going on, and that's why we're talking about it here tonight. The environmental factors that aren't widely known. Depending.
Can I tell you more about pandas? Okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I had some links that I wanted to bring up. I'll give you the links. So there was a guy recently. His name is Grant Acord. Where is he from? I don't know. I'd have to check again where he's from. Anyhow, 17-year-old. Oh, West Albany. Okay, so he had an elaborate plan and a written manifesto about how he was going to blow up his school. And here, I'll give you the links. And what's interesting was that his mother said that he has pandas. I mean, he had like total OCD behaviors and this aggression, these rages. His mother said that he has pandas and he's being treated for it, but they gave him antibiotics and that didn't solve the problem. It really doesn't. Most of the time, maybe if it's caught early, but what it does is your body is making antibodies to your own brain tissue instead of to the strep. So what happens is that it damages the basal ganglia, which is responsible for behavior and behavior and movement, and that's why you get the symptoms of like the deterioration in handwriting. So basically, like, something is attacking your brain. So how are you supposed to act normal when something's attacking your brain? So this guy, he planned to bomb up his school. He's being held on $2 million bail. They want to try him as an adult.
Wow.
For several things, including attempted murder. However, if you consider If you look at this pandas thing, there's still a lot of debate about it. Some doctors don't even believe in it, just like they don't believe in vaccine damage, you know. Yeah. But there's still debate about pandas. But you know, if you took anyone and you did something to their brain to interfere with their functioning, can you hold them responsible for their actions? I don't think so. And I hope that they're able to get him some help and not, you know, like throw him into jail for 20 years for this. It's going to do absolutely nothing. It's like punishing someone for being sick. I mean, if somebody had cancer, you wouldn't put them in jail, you know. I mean, this is a disease that affects the brain, and a lot of mental illnesses, they have biological causes. They affect the brain, then people have behavior, and then end up in jail, you know. So I think that actually the second article says pandas is rare, but I don't think it's that rare. I think what happens is the criteria for it is sudden onset of tics and OCD. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff that comes with it that other kids will display those during a pandas flare. And the OCD may not be the way you expect. It might not be the lights going on and off. It could be like having to touch every single thing, like my son would do that. But I mean to an extreme. All kids will run their stick along the fence, but this is like going into corners and like it's absolutely rigid. You can't get him out of there. He's got to touch I mean, it was really, you know, excessive. So I know from what I've been reading that there are a lot of kids that have symptoms of pandas, and it causes behavioral problems, including what they call oppositional defiant disorder, which means the kid is totally impossible and won't do anything, and we don't know what the hell to do with them. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that, but, you know, it's to the point where it's like, it's not the discipline. And like you said, put the autistic kid in the corner, he doesn't get the timeout. It was the same with my son. I could put him in timeout all day, and it never made a difference. It didn't get through. He just couldn't. It's like he couldn't make the connection between his impulse, his action, and the consequence. It did not matter what I did. And, you know, like I even spanked him a couple times. I didn't know what to do. But clearly it was something in the brain. So I think that there are a lot of kids running around out there who have all these processes that are all screwed up, including pandas. And they're being treated like they're bad, rotten kids.
Yes,
when really,
like they're bad kids.
Damage.
Yeah.
They're not bad kids. There's something wrong with them, because I know my son. He's always been a little sweetheart. You guys have seen him in the videos. He's a sweet little angel. He's so loving with me. And he just totally was not well, and thank God he's getting better. And I don't know what to do. I'm not going to keep him on antibiotics forever. I don't know if that's the solution, but the herbs are working well. Anti-inflammatory herbs like omega-3s and borage oil, somewhat evening primrose oil can also help. You can test if your kid has very bad, bizarre behaviors like that, and you give them a dose of ibuprofen, and which brings down inflammation, and the behavior changes, then you know it's probably related to inflammation, and it's not because they're just a brat. Because my friends were saying he's a brat, this and that, and I'm very. There's a lot of discipline, a lot of consistency, limits, a lot of love, and like I said, it didn't make any difference. So it's not fair to punish these kids. And how many kids are in juvie because they have pandas? I'm starting to wonder.
Right.
And the psych drugs, you say it's the psych drugs causing the school shootings, but those kids are on those drugs because they had a problem to begin with. And you know, it's, the psych drugs don't help and they can cause violence. But what was wrong with them to begin with?
Yeah, that's what we need to find out, and that's what's surely lacking in our medical system, school system, etc. But thankfully, Sonia, people like you are on the front lines and, you know, kind of making us aware of these things. So thank you for that, and thank you for your call. It is that time. We will be right back after this short break. Stay tuned. Soul Journeys Radio.
It's time to get real and heal. MyTrueEssence.net would like to tell you about Modifiland brown seaweed extract. It's composed of an elementally rich seaweed called laminaria. It takes 40 pounds of laminaria to make just 1 pound of Modifiland. There's nothing else like Modifiland. It is the richest in alginate, fucoidin, organic iodine, and lamarian. Alginates are the most effective organic element in nature that enable the body to rid itself of heavy metals, radioactive elements, and toxins. Fucoidin is an extremely effective anti-cancer substance found abundantly in brown seaweed. Organic iodine is the greatest protection for the thyroid offered by nature. Laminarin aids in the prevention and treatment of cardiovascular disease. Go to www.mytrueessence.net and click the Modifiland banner to get started on your path to rich health today. Also check out the Healing Shop for proven essential oils, medicinal teas, and even health coaching. It's time to get real and heal. Go to www.mytrueessence.net.
Get real and heal. Listen to Christie on Soul Journeys Radio.
Welcome to the world's meeting place. American
It's practically narcotic.
freedom
Oh, yes, I like very much.
radio.
You're an American institution.
American Freedom Radio.
All right, welcome back, and thanks for joining us here tonight with TrutherGirl Sonia on Soul Journeys Radio here on AmericanFreedomRadio.com. Again, her YouTube channel, if you have not come across her several hundred fantastic videos, that's youtube.com/TheTrutherGirls, or you can go to her Facebook page, facebook.com/TheTrutherGirls, and we're kind of talking about environmental factors and mental illness here. And Sonia, we kind of ran out of time during the break, but I heard you have a friend there that might be wanting to join us here tonight. So what's up?
Hey.
Hello.
Hi. I'm Susie.
That's my
Hi,
friend.
Susie.
Yeah, we can call her Susie for short. And she was dropping in, and she was one of my closest friends. She was dropping in to do something, and I told her, I'm going to be on the radio, but we're talking about mental illness. And she just, as it so happens, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder as a teenager.
No, 12 years ago.
12 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay, but she had problems as a teenager, and then she was diagnosed with that 12 years ago.
Yeah, 12 years ago I got sick in Europe, and I was hospitalized in Europe for about 10 days. But I had a history of suicidal depression for about 2 years, when I was 13 to about 15. And so this hit me again when I was 26, but in a different way. I got psychotic manic. I have bipolar 1, which is the more serious one. I'm not medicated, and I've been stable for quite a long time now. It just seems that the more the medication I'm on, it just seems to work over a long term.
Wow. So you're saying you are having success taking meds?
Absolutely, yeah.
I've often said to her, she's the most normal person I know. She's so cool and down to earth, and I get the least drama with her, believe it or not. I mean, you know how women can be.
Yeah, I think I also have done my time on the couch, lots of therapy, and I think also I journal about 5 times a week, which helps me. The only thing that I have problems with is getting up in the morning and going to sleep at night. That's the hardest thing. But everything else is good. I exercise regularly. I eat really well. And the medication works, but, it doesn't work for everyone. I've known of a couple of cases where people have atypical bipolar. So, I know of one guy who had, he was more depressive. And so his medication would work for about 3 months, and he'd be able to go back to work, and he's a very physical guy, and he'd do construction, and then he would just crash, and he could only sleep for about he would sleep like 12 to 16 hours a day, and then I'd try a new medication and it would work, and then it would stop working. And then I know of another girl, I don't know her so well, she's more manic-y, and the medication doesn't work for her either.
So you're pretty lucky that it works so well for you.
And I have no side effects.
And no
let
side
me ask you this. When you say that the medication works, what does that mean to you?
Well, when I started with the second medication, because I take two, I take an antipsychotic and a mood stabilizer. When I started with the mood stabilizer, because I'd been on the antipsychotic starting in March 2001, and then around October 2001, they added mood stabilizer. And what that did for me was, I remember 2 days after I started taking it, because I didn't think much about it, I thought, gee, I feel the most inner peace I've ever felt. I don't feel drugged.
Mm-hmm.
I just, there was a lot of inner turmoil, and they changed one of my medications for a short term, just to try something else, and I felt there was dirt inside of my body. It just didn't work, and so we went back to my old medication, and I felt much better. So, yeah.
So what would it be like if you weren't on medication today? What do you think would happen?
Well, that's hard to know, because now I'm not sure, but around 2004, so 3 years after I was medicated, I met a guy, and he's like, I'm going to cure you of your disorder. So without me even saying anything to him or anyone else, I stopped my medication for a week. But I also partied, and at the time I was drinking a lot of wine with him, and then I had a couple of tokes of joints, and then lack of sleep, and so I basically lost track of reality very quickly.
What happened?
I got kind of irritable, manic-y, having thoughts of being messianic again, that sort of thing.
Yeah, the first time she had like delusions that she was the Virgin Mary and stuff like that.
So that was when you were drinking but not taking drugs? Or?
Yeah, drinking and not taking drugs, yeah.
Okay, so, I mean, what if it was just, maybe the drinking or something going on in your diet?
Well, I mean, it's everything, right? It wasn't, I don't think, it definitely wasn't the diet. My diet didn't change, but it was definitely a combination of, I mean, sometimes I think because I've done so much inner healing, and I've done everything I can to get better in terms of, psychology and coming to terms with my hurts and my insecurities, and then, a bit of faith in God, and, I haven't had an episode in a very long time. Sometimes I'm like, gee, I wonder if I'm healed, because it is possible, right? But but then if I were to do it now, I would do it to go off of medication. I've been on it for 12 years, every day.
Wow.
The same dose, except for that 1 week where I went off. So, you don't just, stop taking drugs, overnight and finish. When you stop taking psychotropic drugs, you have to wean off of it and do it with your doctor. But I don't feel I have to do that, you know what I mean? There's no reason. We do blood tests every year, and everything's functioning. My liver and kidneys, blood, everything is fine. So,
okay, and you're saying that you don't have any of the side effects from these medications. Okay,
None.
So you said episode. Can you define what episode means? Does that mean maybe a little anxious or a little depressed or what?
I'm bipolar 1, so I tend to go more towards mania. So we're talking about very fast thoughts, very supreme thoughts of, you think of yourself as a superstar. And then myself, I'm an artist, a performing artist, so I get sort of obsessed with, all the concerts I would do. And then it can go on to, well, maybe I could heal the world with all this stuff. And then I get very happy. I don't sleep. I laugh all night. That sort of thing. That's a minor one. That's what you call a hypomanic episode. But a psychotic episode is which has only really happened to me full blown once, where I needed to be hospitalized. Because then you really become a danger to others and a danger to yourself.
Like you came to a bridge at one point and had thoughts of jumping off the bridge.
No, I didn't have that, not quite. When I was psychotic, but what I did was I walked barefoot in Paris in the month of March, which the month of March is not like here in Canada, but it was still like 15 degrees walking barefoot.
Uh-huh.
And then I walked along the river in Paris called the Seine.
Yeah.
And I thought, what would it be like to swim? So I'm a good swimmer. But if you jump in the Seine, it's so polluted, you're going to die, right? And the currents are so strong. But I didn't do it. But there were times when I struggled with depression, where every time I drive over the bridge, I'd be like, I wonder what it'd be like to fall off. But, of course, I never did anything, you know?
Do you not feel depression anymore?
Well, I have the blues, right? I had a rough winter, but I don't feel depression like before, no.
So, like, even if, I don't know, hypothetically, your dog dies or something gets hit by a car.
Oh, no, I'm a human being. Like, I just had a breakup 2 months ago, and it really hit me hard, but I'm a human
so you
being.
still feel emotion and get what would call depression. Okay, because, I think it's not normal if we're not feeling depression and, traumatic situations like that. But,
that's what you call life sadness or disappointment. But depression for me is something where it's really illness, where you can't function.
Where do you believe that this illness is coming from?
I don't believe that it's genetic, because in my family there's no history of it. And there's absolutely no history of depression either. There might have been some family dysfunction, but I think that in my case, I think that I read once or I heard once that girls in particular who have a serious depression that lasts 2 years, in their formative years when they're 13 or something, have a 50% chance of developing bipolar disorder, or 20 to 50% chance.
Do you think it was the depression that affected your brain chemistry and made you...
Yeah, absolutely.
And what was the depression caused by, though?
Well, I had a bad family situation. We weren't communicating. There was no sort of love expressed. So
maybe it was kind of an environmental thing. I mean, I guess, do you believe that it's a chemical imbalance in the brain?
Well, I think that your brain, everybody's brain is affected by the life you lead. And so it's affected by the relationships you have. So if you have dysfunctional relationships in your formative years with your family, that is going to affect how you feel about yourself, and it's going to affect your brain over the long term. So, but the thing is, like, I went to a talk, about in 2005, that's 8 years ago, a scientific talk about bipolar and other mood disorders. And I asked the question, is there a gene? And they're like, we've spent billions of dollars, we have not found a gene. So there's no gene. So,
there's no gene, there's no chemical imbalance. In fact, I'm not sure if you're...
the way your brain wires up, though.
Yeah, but
it's environmental and as you mentioned, behavioral.
Yeah, and I mean, some people would argue that psychotropics are placebo. I would say that in my case, I'm not one to... I've never been one to be affected by placebo, and I'm not really coerced by the crowd. Mm-hmm. And in my case, it worked, and I noticed a huge difference when I changed medication. And I wanted to go on the other one because it was cheaper.
Well, that's a good point. That if it was a placebo, then the other one should have worked also, especially if you wanted it.
Yeah, I wanted the cheaper brand. And I could have gotten it for free because my doctor had all these samples. But no, it didn't work. It made me feel awful.
I mean, I don't think personally there's anything wrong with the placebo effect. It works for lots of people. I mean, every day, look at just like aspirin or Tylenol, and people, you take it one day for your headache, the next day for your menstrual pain, the next day for your backache, the next day for your knee, and that little pill knows exactly which part of your body to heal. I mean, the way I look at it is whatever works. Whether it's, a pill or eating bananas or listening to music or whatever. So I don't really think the placebo effect is is negative at all. But let me ask you what you think about, are you familiar with Dr. Peter Bregan's work?
No.
Okay, he's been in the psychiatry industry for like 55 years. So he kind of, graduate of Harvard and, written like 20 books. So he's, also been testifying in Congress about these pharmaceuticals, but he says very plainly that there is no scientific evidence to back up their story about a chemical imbalance. And in fact, the only chemical imbalance which has ever been proven is that which is induced after these drugs are introduced to the body. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think he's right, because the fact is, when I went to that talk and asked my questions, the fact is they don't know what bipolar is. They don't know what it is. And so either they haven't found it yet or they just don't understand what it is.
But it doesn't have to be a question of chemical imbalance. Like, look at pandas. It's an autoimmune response that causes your body to attack the basal ganglia, and that interferes with your ability to intercept your own impulses. So, and ADHD also, they say, the basal ganglia can be affected in such a way that you're not connecting between the frontal lobes, which is like your logical thinking, your planning, and the basal ganglia, which is your impulses. But using the Ritalin will rev up the basal ganglia, but that doesn't mean you had a Ritalin deficiency, and it doesn't mean you had a chemical imbalance, but there was some kind of dysfunction in the brain, and some chemical can kind of work around that, but it's not really a solution.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking of the days when, you said something that kind of hit a chord for me, Susie, is that, trauma and abuse and malnutrition can lead to these symptoms. For example, when I was living in an abusive environment, which was essentially the first 20-something years or so of my life, but especially in my teens, I was also diagnosed with bipolar at the time. Later on, and they gave me a bunch of drug cocktails, blah, blah, blah. Later on, they ended up redacting their diagnosis, and, we made a mistake. I guess you just have normal depression and anxiety. But the truth was, it was behavioral condition due to my upbringing at the time. But it is that time, so let's take a little break. We will continue this discussion after these few short minutes. Stay tuned. TrutherGirl Sonia on.
It's time to get real and heal. MyTrueEssence.net would like to tell you about Modifiland brown seaweed extract. It's composed of an elementally rich seaweed called laminaria. It takes 40 pounds of laminaria to make just 1 pound of Modifiland. There's nothing else like Modifiland. It is the richest in alginate, fucoidin, organic iodine, and lamarian. Alginates are the most effective organic element in nature that enable the body to rid itself of heavy metals, radioactive elements, and toxins. Fucoidin is an extremely effective anti-cancer substance found abundantly in brown seaweed. Organic iodine is the greatest protection for the thyroid offered by nature. Laminarin aids in the prevention and treatment of cardiovascular disease. Go to www.mytrueessence.net and click the Modifiland banner to get started on your path to rich health today. Also, check out the Healing Shop for proven essential oils, medicinal teas, and even health coaching. It's time to get real and heal. Go to www.mytrueessence.net.
Get real and heal. Listen to Christie on Soul Journeys Radio.
News and information you can trust. This is American Freedom Radio. Freedom, American Freedom Radio. American Freedom Radio.
Welcome back. Holy moly, how time flies when you're having fun here. Last segment, Soul Journeys Radio with TrutherGirl Sonia and Susie, and we're talking about all sorts of different quote-unquote mental illnesses. And before we went to break, I was talking about my experience, being raised in, a traumatic, abusive environment. And of course, I had like every diagnosis in the world. But when I got strong enough and, started taking a proactive measure to, because I held on to all of that abuse. So I suck, I'm ugly, I'm never going anywhere, I'm crazy, I'm worthless, I'm all of that, which, I'm not going to tell you it's easy to heal. In fact, I'm still in the process to this day. It's a lifelong venture for me, but it wasn't until, I realized that, wow, I don't have to hold on to these thoughts anymore, and learned ways to kind of release and deal with the trauma, that I was able to kind of get those things under wraps with nutrition. Meditation and a few other things, herbs and such as well. So I'm not suggesting that none of this is not real. I certainly know it is. I've lived it. I just think that there are ways, there's multiple ways that we can all, deal with it. And I'm glad, Susie, that whatever medications you're on are working for you. I really, really am, because it's a horrible, really dark place to be. But it's definitely not the only way.
That's true. Yeah. No, and you know what? I wanted to bring up some links, speaking of that, and I dropped a couple in them. One was an article, Behavioral Consequences of Infections of the Central Nervous System, with emphasis on viral infections. I'm not going to go into it too much, but have a look at this, what I just put. Oh, I'll put it back in there again. And it's just like they're talking about case histories of people who basically went crazy, so to speak, after viral infections.
Yeah.
And that it can be reversed, and it was clearly there was a viral connection, and they did recover from it. But the kind of insane behavior was really extreme. I mean, they really lost it. Like, they were behaving absolutely loopy. And then after they recovered, which, by the way, like, a few of them, they had very high fevers while they were in the psychiatric facility. They spiked fevers as high as 107.
Wow.
And I guess that killed off the virus because they were discharged asymptomatic. And here's another one. It's about the link between viruses and mental illness again. Not to say it's the only thing, but I just wanted to finish with that. And they're talking about the flu, and it's been known that if a mother has influenza while she's pregnant, that the baby has a higher risk of schizophrenia. And neurologist Russell Blaylock talked about that and pointed out that it's just this stimulating her immune system in some way with an illness that can raise the risk, and that's why vaccines logically would also raise the risk, and that's not a way out of the, a way to avoid the problem. But they mention here that it's not the infection itself, but it's the mother's immune system's reaction to it, and that it results in possibly compromised fetal brain development. So, that's another thing that's possible, is in utero exposure to the mother's immune system reaction. Okay, now the other thing was wheat. Now, I mentioned before there's the gliadins, which are like morphine-like, they're, what do you call them? They're partial molecules, peptides, that can get through a leaky gut, get into the brain, and intoxicate you. And it's like you're on a drug, And then the other thing are lectins, which inhibit neurogenesis, so like the growth of nerves. So for an adult, this can cause problems, but for a developing child's brain, if they're intolerant, if they're like they have a non-celiac, or a celiac kind of condition which doesn't involve the gut symptoms, but they're still intolerant to wheat, and they're being fed wheat, which, by the way, it's turning out American wheat is contaminated with GMOs, and that's why, like, Korea and other countries are now banning U.S. imports of wheat because they're GMO contaminated. So who knows what else that's going to do. But, if you got a kid and they're sensitive to gluten, they're sensitive to gliadin, and they're eating things with lectins in it and all that, that could damage their brain development. And this article here, I'll put the link in too. One thing they mentioned was that the link between wheat and schizophrenia has been known for a long time, and that during World War II, during World War II, during war times where wheat supplies were low, schizophrenia admissions would also drop. And this was in several countries, and this was been studied. And then as the grain rations increase, the schizophrenia starts to increase as well. And some people have said maybe it's ergot in the wheat, but it's probably not that. They think that it has something to do with, these other things that we mentioned, the gluten and the lectins and things like that. And
I wonder, Sonia, and the studies and such, do you think it's this way for all wheat, like since the beginning of time, or is it just in the last couple decades since the introduction of
look,
GMO?
Yeah, no, it's not. No, first of all, GMO wheat is not approved. It's not approved.
It's not approved, but they're using it.
No, they're not officially using it. It's not officially approved, and it's a contamination. And during World War II, that wheat was definitely not GMO. But the thing with wheat, and if you look at like what is it called, the tooth decay diet. What are they called? Oh, I can't think of them now. Anyway, it'll come to me. But this foundation for this traditional diet that prevents tooth decay and helps other things, but I just can't think of the name right now. Anyhow, they like in the book Cure Tooth Decay by Rami Nagel.
Yeah.
What is the name of that foundation? I can't think of it right now. But anyhow, so
the Weston Price Foundation?
Yeah, that's it. The Weston Price Foundation.
Yeah.
So when they looked at the use of grains in traditional setting, they didn't just use the grains. They always knew that unless they're processed a certain way, they're not safe to use. And this was common knowledge in all of the, indigenous and tribal cultures, whether it was North America or Africa or Europe. And they would put the grains through a long, elaborate process of soaking, sprouting, drying in the sun, and then milling, and then sifting, and then souring before they were used. So they went through a lot to make them safe, And so we eat grains that haven't been treated in this way. I mean, they're processed in other ways, but they're not treated like that. So these things that are in them are not disabled, for one. And the other thing is that the leaky gut, that has a lot to do with, just an imbalance in gut flora, and it can have to do with a lot of things, the use of antibiotics and lack of breastfeeding is a big one.
What do you think about the mold issues? Someone's bringing up in the chat, even, non-GMO whole grains can get moldy, and perhaps that could have something to do with it too?
Well, I think that maybe they're thinking of ergot, because ergot, it's a type of mold that can cause neurological and psychiatric symptoms. And they say that it's a big problem with livestock feed, that 30% of the livestock feed is affected, but they say that, they try to sift them out. But, I mean, these are little tiny grains. If it's in the livestock grains, why wouldn't it make its way into grains that humans eat as well, at least in a small amount?
Yeah.
But in any case, our wheat that we have now is not it's not all necessarily GM wheat, because there's a lot of kinds. There's, spelt and kamut and all these different things. But they are... they're hybridized, and they've been bred differently for hundreds of years, and they're not treated in the traditional ways. Plus, some people are just genetically prone to being sensitive to it. So, in any case, the wheat, like our diet is so wheat-based. You talk to people about going gluten-free, and they're like, well, we can't do that. We eat pasta and we eat all this wheat stuff. But it's probably worth it. And one last thing about schizophrenia is the study here about omega-3 fatty acids for prevention of psychotic disorders. And what they did was they took people who were in the prodromal stage of schizophrenia. So they were starting to show symptoms, but they hadn't progressed to psychosis. And they gave them omega-3s. And in the group that were treated, only 2 of 41 progressed to psychosis. And in the placebo group, 11 of 40. So it's a small group, but still, you could say that. And the amount that they were giving them wasn't really that high, at 1.2 grams. Like, that's not even that much. But it seems that there's a connection, and there's other studies that have been done on that. So, there are probably quite a lot of nutritional factors. And we're gonna. I know we're coming to the end of the show, but I wanted to tell you one last thing, because I didn't get to tell you before what kind of a kid I was. I was a very non-responsive kid. You'd show me a toy, I wouldn't turn my head, you'd talk to me, and I just didn't engage. I didn't interact very much. I didn't make eye contact. I didn't look. You pick me up, and I'd be looking off the other way, not like, kids usually, they'll go up to you, they'll show you stuff, they'll try to interact with you. And I'm talking about when I was really small, like a year, or under a year and a half, that kind of thing. And it's like a social disorder. I mean, I didn't have any kind of learning disability, and nobody knew what that was at the time, and I still don't know what it was. Is that I have a lot of sensory issues, but I don't process things, I think, the same way other people do. for sounds and stuff like that. But back in the old days,
definitely don't have a learning disability.
No, I never had learning. But my teachers, some of them thought I was stupid. They wrote that in the report cards. I got kicked out of every summer camp. I got kicked out of 2 schools. I went.
You were on the back of the bus.
It was as it's a social disease. It took me a long time to learn how to be civilized.
Ah, darn it! I hear the music.
It's time to get real and heal. MyTrueEssence.net would like to tell you about Modifilan brown seaweed extract. It's composed of an elementally rich seaweed called laminaria. It takes 40 pounds of laminaria to make just 1 pound of Modifilan. There's nothing else like Modifilan. It is the richest in alginate, fucoidin, organic iodine, and lamarian. Alginates are the most effective organic element in nature that enable the body to rid itself of heavy metals, radioactive elements, and toxins. Fucoidin is an extremely effective anti-cancer substance found abundantly in brown seaweed. Organic iodine is the greatest protection for the thyroid offered by nature. Laminarin aids in the prevention and treatment of cardiovascular disease. Go to www.mytrueessence.net and click the Modifilan banner to get started on your path to rich health today. Also check out the Healing Shop for proven essential oils, medicinal teas, and even health coaching. It's time to get real and heal. Go to www.mytrueessence.net.
Get real and heal. Listen to Christie on Soul Journeys Radio.
You're listening to the future of talk. American Freedom Radio. This is American Freedom Radio.